Hello, everybody. Welcome to the URM podcast. I'm EYAL Levy, and my guests today are two of my favorite people in music, Mr. Jens Bogren and the legendary Ihsahn. Jens is one of the most prolific producers in metal. I would say that if you were to make a list of the most influential producers of the past 20 years who have really helped bands make career-defining albums, that list would be incomplete without Jens. And he's known for work with bands such as Opeth, Dimmu Borgir, Amon Amarth, Arch Enemy, Leprous. The list goes on. He's also the founder of Bogren Digital, which is a really, really sick plugin company. They make some great stuff, and he's been a frequent URM contributor. Other guest is Ihsahn, who is one of the founding members of the one and only Emperor. As he's also a super prolific, super insightful guy, and one of my favorite musicians in the scene, and really one of my favorite musical brains. What's really, really cool is that URM got to make a course with both of them called How It's Done with Jens Bogren and Ihsahn, where we featured the entire production process, start to finish, of an Ihsahn song called The Observer, meaning pre-pro to mastering, where Jens produced and mixed and did everything on this Ihsahn song. And we just released it. You can check it out at nailthemix.com/Jens course. I would say that it's the most comprehensive production course ever made. And I am not exaggerating, because before that, URM already made the most comprehensive production courses ever made. But this is even more so. It's 35 hours long, and it is intense. It's intense, and it's great. My guests also are intense and great. That's enough. Let's get into it. I present you Jens Bogren and Ihsahn. Jens Bogren and Ihsahn, welcome to the URM podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both for being here. What is it? Almost, not quite a year later, but I'd say 9 months since we were in, well, I guess, Jens, you've been in Sweden this whole time, but 9 months since we worked on the course and your EP. And I'm wondering, now that you've had a little bit of distance from that, both of you, how do you feel about having cameras in your face the entire time while actually trying to make a real piece of music? And the reason I'm asking is because typically with the kind of content that URM makes, we're like with a Nail the Mix or something, even though the mixer is mixing in real life, they're mixing something that already came out. Like, like what you're doing in Opeth, Nail the Mix, like that's something you already mixed. So there isn't that pressure of it coming out into the world for the first time. And I know for you, Ihsahn, on the artist side of it, just having us in your face the entire time and having to like disregard that and just do your thing. I'm just wondering, like looking back on it, what was that like for both of you in terms of being able to stay focused on the job at hand?
Jens, you go first.
You think I should go first? Because I think for me, it's not really a big deal. For me, I think the most difficult part about this was time planning and the fact that everything took so much longer because of all the explanation that I was doing while doing things, and also doing interviews and trying to relate to the artists and the musicians around this. Because we had to work much longer the days that I anticipated, and more days as well. So, but for the actual creative part, I don't think I saw that as a problem. I would probably think differently if I was the actual musician performing, because that is a little bit more sensitive, in my opinion. What do you say, Vegard? Ihsahn, sorry.
It was very different. I'll give it to you guys at URM that I think you made it yourself very. The situation was very normal. I mean, it all blended. It didn't feel like there were cameras in your face, because the atmosphere was so relaxed. The kind of conversation we had on camera, off camera, I'm very, very quickly, I felt that like it became very fluent. Like it was just part of the whole thing. And as Jens says, of course, it took longer time because everybody was explaining what they were doing all along the way. And, going into the project, I was afraid it should be, I usually work here in my studio, just alone. I don't really even go to sessions with other people. but that part of it, I think, went really fluently. When I was watching some of the footage now that the course is released, I got much more self-aware.
I can't watch myself this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I hate it.
I hate it. I can't listen to my podcasts or anything. I just trust that it's good and let it go into the world and never. I just can't. But so on the topic of it feeling natural, I think that. And I've thought about that because it's really important to us, obviously, is to not make people feel uncomfortable. So, because that's going to affect everything. And obviously, we just don't want to make people uncomfortable. But I think that the fact that everybody at URM has had some level of experience making records, like, for me with my band or producing, or Nick, he assistant engineered for this producer named Andrew Wade for a long time. John Douglas, the audio engineer we brought, like he's always working with people like Jay Rustin and just like all kinds of great metal and rock producers. And so like everybody, and he's been in bands too. So all of us kind of are from that world, and we know the kinds of things that we know the etiquette, I guess. And that I had a previous experience. I'm not going to name the company, but before URM, I used to make courses for a company, and the crew were not music people. They were just video people, and they were very nice people. So very professional, very nice. So nothing against them, but they did not understand the etiquette or the vibe or the mentalities, any of it, involving making records, and especially metal records. And so there was always this very odd vibe. And anytime I brought an artist in to do something with me, like that was always a problem, was having like 5 people in the room who just don't understand really what's going on. So we try to do the opposite of that, which is only bring in people who are from this world, who just happen to be working with us, but they're from this world. And I think that's crucial. It's basically by metal people, for metal people, and everyone basically has been in the game. I think that matters.
If I can add to that as well, I mean, that naturally helps. It's like in any situation, whether that's live, if you say it's some kind of young festival that's just starting up, and there's all these good intentions, but they don't really speak the language of, how do you organize this stuff? It's just, you need to be, and I think that's, as I say, part of the comfort zone. And as with this being self-aware part, obviously, I was thought that I'd add to that as being representing the artist, in this course. Of course, you're very exposed, because with 35 hours, you keep in my mistakes in there, the fiddling around, the playing, wrong notes, maybe
we only kept that.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
35 hours of mistakes.
But then again, everybody, of course, the records are kind of an illusion, for most listeners. But for the people getting into this course, obviously you don't start with a course like this. So it also relates to people who are in a similar situation. I think, me making mistakes, I want to talk, Jens doesn't make mistakes, but I think I guess it makes it more real and more relatable, in a sense that, regardless of how many years you've been doing this, the process is the same. The process is the same for everybody. Everybody just wants to make the best possible version of what they do. And then you break some eggs, and that's the reality of things.
And it's a necessary part of the process. And I think you're right. It does make it more real. And I think that unless you've been around, I think unless you've been around, I guess what you would call your heroes or the people who make the records that you aspire for your own records to sound like, whether you are on the artist side or the production side, or you do both, it's easy to believe the illusion, and it's easy to believe that these are just superhumans who make this great stuff that you love, and it just comes out like that. It always existed like that, because you didn't see it getting made. You're not part of it. I remember actually it was an Opeth live DVD. Remember the one that came out like in 2004, watching it, and there's this part where Michael is playing these octave slides up and down the neck, and he lands like a half step off on one of them, and it's a lead. Like it is very, very noticeable, and he like laughs about it and keeps going, and they kept that in there, and I thought that was incredible that they kept it in there. First of all, it was pure balls, but second of all, what it did was it made me think, okay, this band's for real. This band's for real, because if they kept that in, okay, I make that mistake too sometimes when I'm trying to slide octaves, like a 12th fret slide or something.
I hope I never make that mistake.
Yeah, never made it. Yeah, but it was really helpful for me to see that. And then also another example was Bard from Leprous. I know in one of his playthroughs that he released a few years ago, like it's incredible. I mean, everyone knows he's just an unbelievable drummer. He drops a stick in the middle, and I know so many drummers who would scratch the take, do it over. He just kept going. So the stick drop is in the video, and he just recovers, grabs another stick, and keeps going. And to me, and I read the comments, so many people in the comments were talking about how awesome it is that was kept in there, because it makes you realize that's a real human. I love what they do, and I aspire to do something on that level. And it actually is a person who makes the same mistake that I make, or my drummer makes, or that everybody makes. Wow. So if that's happening to that person, that means that this is much more real. It's much more attainable than I previously thought.
I wouldn't perhaps keep that in on an album, though. The
No, definitely not.
No, but this is I'm kind of split, in my opinion on not on that, but I think what you're saying, I think that is, makes the experience even more so. It's like if there's a technical problem at a live show, and then you just sort it. You apologize for the inconvenience for the audience, and then you keep going, and then you have twice the energy afterwards. Mm-hmm. Because they see it's not perfect. It's problems, something happens, But for recordings or any kind of parts of artwork, of course, there's all this work and all these mistakes that goes into it. Watching a movie, how many takes for each scene, that people never see, or how many kind of remakes of every painting, of even the greatest artworks we know. And for, as the end consumer, if you can say it like that, I think that is a good thing that people don't get to see all the mistakes, because it shouldn't, I guess this is kind of a pet peeve of mine these days with all the social media stuff, and we're all guilty and it's kind of unavoidable. But sometimes you feel you don't get to experience this distance to the artist, and this perfect album that just lands on you, and you don't even know the people in the band, and suddenly you go to an Iron Maiden concert, and you're breathing the same air as these people, That's part of the experience. But these days it's like, oh yeah, they had this for dinner before going on stage tonight. It kind of brings it all down. But for the purposes of this course, for the people who want to be making those kind of illusions and records, I think it's encouraging to see that artists and producers and engineers on any levels will have to deal with, lots of takes and editing and to make the illusion as good as it can get.
Exactly, because that is the thing, and a lot of my philosophy as well, that when I produce things, I want it to sound like it was the perfect take, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to sound like it was edited. I hate when you hear the autotune. I hate when the drums sound stale from editing. But I use those tools a lot to reach the level where it sounds like a magic take, And I also think exactly like that. I really enjoyed that like early 90s kind of live show thing where it just sounds Can I cuss here? Yeah, when it just sounds fantastic, and you don't really, you don't want to hear mistakes there. You just want it to sound like, you listen to Operation Mindcrime or whatever, Live Crime, and it's just like, sounds better than the album. It's like, I don't care if they re-recorded the whole thing afterwards, as long as it sounds and looks that great to me. To be honest.
I agree. I miss that too. I'm speaking purely within the context of a person actively trying to get better at not from the fan perspective, but purely from the in the trenches musician or in the trenches aspiring producer who's trying to absorb as much information as possible and really study their influences. I think in that context it's a good thing to be able to see what the struggles are, just so that there's a lot of mental stuff that goes on with creating art, no matter what side of it you're coming in on, the production artist side. There's this psychological side to it where I think very few people don't torture themselves over it. I think they're sociopaths. Like I think that it's a well-known thing that the artistic personality is a tortured one, and it's because often you're not sure about the thing that you're doing. Like, does it suck? Is it good enough? Like, is it like a total loss of perspective is very, very normal. And like getting to see things like that, getting to see that other people who are doing the kind of thing that you want to do are also going through these struggles. That's how they overcome them. Okay, that happens to them, and it's not that big of a deal. Because I remember, like in my early days of playing live, I used to really, really, really like kill myself over missing a note. And obviously, you don't want to miss a note. You don't want to make a mistake, but it's going to happen. Everyone is going to fuck up at some point, and it's not the end of the world. It's definitely not the end of the world. It's not worth the torture that you put yourself under. And if you realize it happens to everybody, this is how they deal with it. That's how I should deal with it too. This is how the people that I look up to deal with it. All right, that's a model for how to go about it. Or the people who I look up to, they go through this stuff too. Okay, cool. So I'm not unique. Like I'm not on an island here. Like these problems, like I remember when I was first learning how to produce and setting up studios and getting all kinds of weird electrical issues in the first room I was setting up and not understanding how to get rid of hum and like just humming everything. Like, how do I get rid of noise? And it's like, it's got to be my building. It's got to be like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, like, etc. And then come to find out that in most cases, this is something that every producer or engineer, studio builder deals with at some point. And even at the biggest studios in the world, like it's still a problem sometimes. And I'm not unique here. And everybody has to figure out a way to get the electricity right in their studio. And, once you know that, then you can at least deal with the problem, I guess, more objectively and rationally, rather than thinking that it's just because you don't know what you're doing and everything you set up is fucked up. Basically, it helps you focus on the actual problems and solutions, I think.
Yeah, I should also say that, I mean, maybe there is also a reason why I wanted to work with Ihsahn for this one, because he is, represents the more skilled musician side, where it's a little bit more, fun to work with in that regard, and you could sort of focus on other things than just struggle in the studio. But that happens as well. I mean, I work with a lot of bands, on high-level bands, where they are big, not because they can play their instruments so well, but because they, have good songwriters in the band, or people really enjoy what they're doing, or for whatever other reason. And it is a real struggle in the studio sometimes, even for me, to make those performances sound like it's natural and great, right? Sometimes I've been spending 10 days on rhythm guitars, just grinding through, struggling to make it work for an album. And it's just the nature of things. In this course, it went smoother than it definitely could do. But I remember back in the day, before I started to work with like more recognized bands, that I thought that the reason why I cannot reach the results that are like top level is because I'm not working with top level artists. But then when I got to that point, I realized that many of the artists that I'm working with now are not more skilled than the ones that I used to work with back in my old hometown, doing, local albums and demos. It's just that, obviously my own experience is bigger these days, and I know where I need to to end up, and I just have to find the ways to get there. So yeah, as a producer,
so you blame the band, not yourself.
I always blame the band. Yeah, no, but it's just that as a producer, you have to be aware that you're going to have to deal with all kinds of things, and just find the solutions to go forward. There is no like one method that will fit or is appropriate every time, if you understand what I mean. If I would work with you, Ihsahn, and I would like have this method where I have to grid everything and have to record with Evertunes or whatever, it would sound extremely fucking boring, the result. While some other artists or bands, I might have to go in those directions, even though I'm not the gridder. If you watch the course, you will understand my philosophies here. But yeah, it's you need to adapt depending on the artist you work with, and of course the artistic visions to some extent. But these things is usually one of those things that the artists maybe not have a strong opinion on. They would just expect me to do what I need for it to become good.
Yeah, and I think exactly like the duality of this, as we talked about, this course is for the people who want, in some extent, to do what we do. What we have the privilege of doing, and maybe, as I told the EYAL, that, we would kill for something like this when we started out, because our only perspective was the illusion. We only have the albums,
Yeah.
We didn't get to see all the mistakes. We didn't get to peek behind the scenes. When I started out, the only thing I had was my manual for my 4-track recorder. That was my reference. I had absolutely no idea how people would be doing this, and still, like we talked about, we all have these imposter syndromes that we struggle with, and it's been comforting to me to see some of the artists that I hold in high regard, that I think they never make mistakes. It's just so easy for them, and they also have, in conversation, it comes like they have exactly the same imposter syndromes, and it's like, yeah, it's comforting, because then you can work your way through it, and even my personal experience, I was very excited to go and do this course, because me and Jens, we've been working on so many records, really, but it's been really me recording stuff in my studio, and mixing and mastering has kind of been the main focus point of our collaborations. So to go over to Sweden again, see Jens and his amazing crew, work on all these things, and try to see the level of detail. Of course, just as a fan of doing this, it's amazing to be part of that. But also to see that, I have learned to do some of this stuff right. On this, so there's like part, learning a lot of new stuff by following along, as I've done with every engineer I ever worked with, but also like a confirmation that, I'm after 30 years, I'm doing some of these parts right.
It's not all wrong. Something I was curious about. You said this in the course. You mentioned that this is the first time you've ever had someone like a producer come in and mess with the songs at all. Like, is your first experience with that? And I'm curious now, in retrospect, what was that like for you? Because in watching that whole section, and I was in the room for that section, and the communication between all of you was so professional. And obviously it's professional because everybody's a pro, but that particular type of scenario where you're working on somebody else's song, and you're suggesting changes, that can go lots of different ways. And some people are totally cool with it. Some people are totally not cool with it. Some people want to be cool with it, but then deep down inside they're not. And so it leads to some like a minefield, basically, of communication. And what I've noticed is, at least with the people that I work the best with, and who are like, I guess, my closest friends in this, or like the people that I relate to the most, I've noticed that this idea of feedback, and like same with like there's this orchestrator in my band, a guy, Jesse Zaretti, and he does work for all kinds of big video games and things of that nature. And we were talking about feedback, how like he's constantly getting feedback from these creative teams, like, and he can't get personal about it ever. It's just gotta be good at it. And he says that he always welcomes it, because anytime he gets his feedback, whatever he's writing gets better. And I've noticed the same too. Like when I'm working with Krim on songs, anytime he sends me feedback on make this part better, it's too much of the same thing, whatever. Even if I worked on it for a long time, it gets better. But I've also noticed in the studio, or past band members or whatever, that topic can make people get really nuts, and it can cause lots of problems. So, especially because this was your first time having a producer actually change one of your songs, and that's not like in 30 years, first time. What was that like for you, and how do you feel about it now in retrospect?
Yeah, let's be fair. I'm a solo artist for a reason. I've always thought that I was a great collaborator. A lot of the people I work with think not. I learned that the hard way. No, it's not really for me. I don't think I like to think that it's not an ego thing. It's just that when I have an idea in my head, it's just so strong that it's almost impossible for me to deviate from that. And it's a horrible trait to have as a musician. I know. And sometimes, over time, like I've had, one of the few people who can get through to me in situations like that is my wife, because we work so closely together. But, I may lose totally inspiration for a couple of weeks. If I feel I have something great, and she was like, this could be better, even trying to politely say it, and having some ideas. And then, eventually I ended up changing it, and it was totally for the better. But at the time I didn't see it. So, but I'm split. I mean, recently with this project, but also, I had the opportunity to work with Matt Heafy on his Ibaraki record. Mm-hmm. I was doing orchestrations for the Trivium album, doing bits and pieces like that, or stuff that I worked with Lepers, helping out Einar with some, recording vocals or whatever. When it's other people's music, or, I go into it with a collaborative mind. Like with this project, I have no problem with that. As long as, it really helps, of course, that you are with like-minded people and everybody has a similar level of experience. So that there's a trust. The ideas, all the ideas are valid. It's no ego like, oh, I'm in the room, so I have to have, a say on this song. It's like, this the best idea wins situation. And in this situation, no problem at all. Because me and Jens, we started talking about this even before I wrote the songs. And then I remember I sent you quite a few different ideas for songs, that we could pick from, like what vibe and what kind of composition would suit this kind of course the best. That's why I wanted to have Tobias Andersen with me, for the drums, because I knew he could also elaborate on, the setting up of the drums and everything like that. Øystein Odland, I knew he had a beautiful baritone voice, but he's also this amazing keyboard player. He knew his way around, the drawbars on that Hammond.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So you get it. The whole project was already there was a collaborative spirit around the whole thing, and to me that was, probably the most inspiring thing about it. To really just shoulders down, throwing ideas in there, and shape this together with all the amazing people who I got to work with. So it's really just that's the biggest difference, that I went into this with that mentality. It's much harder when you're kind of doing stuff on your own, and then someone kind of comes in at last minute on the sideline and starts trying to pick it apart. It's a different thing.
Yeah, I guess that's just different parameters, different
Totally.
parameters and boundaries to the project. But still, I've been in situations and seen it a lot where people say the best idea wins. No egos here. But then in the actual practice of trying to collaborate, it's very much not like that. And Jens, you're smiling because I know you've experienced that too with artists, where the words spoken in advance are yes, if we're all about the best idea, but then in reality, is not exactly. So in watching the way that you all communicated and collaborated, it truly was best idea wins, and I appreciated that, and I think that even so, I don't think that it's a bad trait personally. I'll just say that for like there to be a singular vision. I mean, some of our favorite artists are people with a singular vision who aren't necessarily in like a band where everybody has an equal say. But I think the ability to collaborate like that when the situation calls for is very important. And I think that there's something to learn from that. I mean, Jens, just out of curiosity for you, is that a tough topic for you to broach, like when working with an artist? Like, do you need to kind of figure out what their personality type is in advance before you go there? Or like, how do you approach this? It's a minefield. Like, how do you go about it?
Yeah, it really is. And I would say most of the time it's fine. Some artists are great when it comes to this in terms of being open and really like understanding or maybe they have like not the best self-esteem in songwriting, and that thus they are more open to trying to make it better. Whilst other times it's extremely difficult and can become like personal very quickly. And then I've been in situations where I have to like try to really think about what kind of decision I should try to make here, because I can either try to push through or maybe manipulate the changes I feel is like necessary for the product or the song, or I would think that if I do this, I will never see this person again or this band again.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
They might break up. It might be for real.
Anything could happen, right?
Yeah.
And then it becomes also, you have to think about it like this: like who is employing me? Back in the day, it was a little bit more common that a label would approach you to produce a band, right? And then you have to sort of answer to the label how this product becomes. I would say these days that's very uncommon, at least for me. Now it's almost always the artist, at least in the metal field. It's like the label will give. Or I would say the label is rarely involved in any creative decisions. And it's like the band comes to me to help them, and it's their album, or it's the artist's album. So at the end of the day, I also need to not have my own ego too high. I should I have to navigate, like, what do I feel really strongly about? How would this affect the ongoing production if I start a conflict here over something? Maybe I try to win an argument about something, and then I get 3 days of useless vocal takes because of it.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? So it's that's something I need to balance all the time. And usually it's fine. Like I said, some bands are extremely open about this. There are bands that would even, perhaps, or have called me like their sixth member or something, because it's been such a nice collaborate thing. I am even, they use me to not fight within the band as well. Like, let's just have Jens decide this, and they go into the studio with that.
When you mixed those 3 songs for me back in October, there was this one section. Yeah, I remember that me and Sean just could not agree on. Like, we just couldn't. And the decision was, we're not going to agree. Let's just let Jens, whatever Jens decides, we'll just go with that, because me and you are not going to agree on this, and we don't need to fight about this. Let's just let Jens decide. Whatever he goes with, cool.
It makes sense, I think
that's because we trust you. That's the big part. We trust you, so that's why it was okay. It's not just let anybody make this change. It's like, we trust you, so we trust that whatever change you make will be the right one.
Yeah, I think for some, a band, they spend so much time together. They they're basically family, live together, tour together, etc. It's really important that they can keep a healthy relationship within the band. And going into the studio can be really stressful in those situations, depending on the personalities of these people, obviously. But let's say that there is this strong band member that sort of steps on the other members' toes all the time. I shouldn't name any band names here, but that happens. And other bands are a little bit smarter about it and perhaps hand over more to the producer, and that way they could, just fire the producer for the next album instead if they are not happy, so they can at least agree on something, and that it binds them together instead of having a recording session that just drives them apart because they're all trying to act producers. I've had all sorts of experiences when it comes to this.
So I have a question about... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, could I just pitch? Because these days, with all the information you get through media and everything, the term producer, seems to be, it could be anything. Someone like making a beat, but traditionally, in my impression is that the producer is the one who takes responsibility to make the album or the product, the best that it can be. With the ingredients served, and I can imagine, it's a really tough job, because, me, have, again, without outing any of my collaborators, but I think a lot of us who have played in bands, even in the stuff we did in, early teens. The illusion again amongst the audience is that it's 4 or 5 guys really pushing it, everybody's contributing equally and blah blah blah, and everybody who ever played in the band knows that it's 1 or 2 people who has to do everything, and the rest are complaining, and they're only present if there's money or beer around. So that's putting but I think again there's a perception of how things work, and then there's the reality of how things work, and I think again the mentality going into it. I think also for bands I think I'm not quite sure how this works. Say in a band like Opeth, just using it as an example. But I think I have the impression that Michael is doing the writing, and everybody trusts that. That's fine. That's his job. And then he, in turn, has all these amazing musicians in his band and pulls out, those qualities, and that becomes, an amazing, evolving band like Opeth, because the roles are really defined, and everybody's, seemingly, doing what they are best at. And that makes the best result. And as I think, as long as you go into a project like that, I saw something with Radiohead as well. I think it was Ed O'Brien, the guitar player, one of the guitar players, who said that with Radiohead, with all the different arrangements they do, sometimes it could be hard for the ego to sit there and make a song and realize that this song is better if I don't play anything on this.
Yeah.
But I think that is really, then you have defined a very nice culture within that group, that doesn't matter, And I think that is something that most bands should strive for, or just go solo.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of, kind of on that topic of doing what's best for the song, one thing I noticed also was in the demo version of the song, there were no bad parts. Like everything was awesome. It was already awesome, and it could have been, you could have just gone with it the way it was, and it would have been really good. So it wasn't like taking something bad and molding it into something good. Like it was taking something that was already really good and making it even greater. And one thing that I noticed was that there were parts that were on their own really awesome, that you guys were totally cool to just either get rid of or like completely minimize, or just not go in that direction, where if you just heard the part on its own, like it's awesome. But then in the context of the song itself, I don't know if you guys actually said this out loud, but it seems like the underlying question was, is this making the song better or not? If it's not, then goodbye. If it is, then cool. And it doesn't matter how good the part is on its own. Is it making the song better? Does it fit the grander context? Is it part of the big picture? So I'm wondering, when it comes to that, like, so both on your side, Ihsahn, as like the person writing it, and then you, Jens, is the person producing and like helping make changes, when there's a part that you have spent a long time on, right? And it is legit, it is objectively a really good part. Or Jens, when you're pre-proing a song and there's a part that someone wrote that obviously they spent a long time on, and again, hearing it in isolation, it is an awesome part, but it just does not fit. And so how do you go, what's the mental side of getting cool with getting rid of it? Because I know that it's like there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy that I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's just this fallacy that is part of it's just part of human nature, that we have this idea that the more time we spend on something, or the more it's about money. It's a financial thing. It's like sunk costs. Like, I already spent this much money on this thing, on this like boat or something that I really shouldn't own, but I put so much money into it, and like it's falling apart. I need to keep going, or like I need to keep investing in this thing, or I need to keep this part of this song because I spent 1 week straight only on this part, and this part's awesome. And then to come to hear or realize it doesn't fit the song or doesn't make it better, it's a hard thing for the human mind to accept because of the amount of time and effort that went into it. So I'm wondering, for both sides, how do you approach that mentally?
For me, it's pretty easy since I'm not the one spending the time usually. What I usually would say, let's first say that there are no absolute truths when it comes to these things, right? Songwriting. Because you could say that Opeth is writing terrible songs, that would not work on the radio at all. Let's make them into 3-minute songs and they would be great. And they probably would be great, but they're also great in their 10-minute format, right? So there are no absolute truth there. But I guess, so it completely depends on the artist and what kind of vision and what kind of listener that would go into this. But I guess instinctively, if I hear something like that, it feels like there are too many ideas in this song. It doesn't make sense for this song to have this many ideas. Then I would suggest that. And then there could be a decision like, are we going to focus on these parts or are we going to focus on these parts? What would make the better song? And sometimes it would take me a few attempts because I usually work quite a lot with that, like demo cuts and edits and send back and forth maybe with the band if we're working remotely and do suggestions. And sometimes it takes a few attempts for that to sort of land. And sometimes I would actually come back to the original versions like, okay, well, actually, this in this format is probably the reason why I enjoyed this song to begin with. And then I was maybe overthinking about maybe we can trim this part, but in its whole, it makes sense. Or the opposite, we actually need to really make this song move faster in these parts, etc. And sometimes I would just say, this is a great riff, make a new song out of it for the next album. That will, of course, never happen, but that's how I would sell that thing. But there are no hard truths here, but I could just follow my own head in those cases, right? And usually, for me, that has worked out.
Yeah, but it's a matter of taste, isn't it? And it's this quote where the first step to developing a good taste is like trusting your own opinion, and that can go both ways. And as Jens said, I mean, I think especially extreme metal bands have done this mistake, starting out, and that is like, okay, we don't want to be doing what everybody else is doing. We don't want to follow the pop formula like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, and with 2 verses, pre-choruses, and a bridge, choruses. We want to do something else, and then you have all these extreme metal bands who piece together. At some point in the early days, like pre-Emperor stuff, like in the death metal period before the black metal thing, it was almost like a competition in between bands, like how many riffs could they put into a song, So it's like, oh, that's so experimental, blah, blah, blah. But it's really just, again, not mentioning names, but so many bands who just like piece together totally unrelated material, for so and so many minutes.
Bad songwriting.
Really bad songwriting. Then again, you have examples like Opeth. I'm not saying they do that, but suddenly there are some really surprising elements, like huge down sections with acoustic guitars, like in the middle of a song, that is seemingly unrelated, but that becomes more like a change of scene in a movie because it's much more long format. So it can, of course, it can be a bad idea and it can be done very tastefully and successfully, but as a general rule, as I've been doing this for a while. My go-to is really to not try to add too many elements, and still, go back to using very, very traditional compositional tools. If I need a bridge, how about I play all the notes backwards in half tempo and see if I can work a bridge out of that. It's still the same building blocks, and it's still connected, even if it sounds totally different. I think on the subconscious level, it's part of the song, and I think that is almost more challenging, to have a very, very core idea, not like Beethoven. We're not that that's the perfect example that everybody refers to, the da 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 da, and that's the core motive of an entire symphony.
Yep.
And that's how much variation, and it feels like one piece. But then again, I now go around playing live shows with Emperor, and we have so many songs that have a totally unrelated intro. And then there may be some repetition of riffs in between, and then an outro, which has nothing to do with the rest. And people are singing along and having a good time, So there's no absolute truth to that. But the craftsmanship, and just to add to, to the way we, edit the song and everything. Normally, of course, I will do that part, on my end. Because then I do all these second guessing and cutting and doing the editing, because I'm self-supplied in that respect. But for this project, I didn't have to do that. So I kind of presented, deliberately presented the raw idea, because I knew it, it was no point in me going into this, holding it like dear to my heart and like be very precious about it, because the whole idea was this collaboration, that Jens would produce it, and then I don't have to, make all those decisions on my own and second guess it. I could, play ball with someone with that experience, and that was much more interesting. So I didn't, put all that work into making it, the most perfect, whatever. I just went very fluently, making the song, open that this will be edited in some form, and so I guess that's also a matter of, as a band or as an artist going into the studio, if you get the opportunity to work with Jens or someone of his caliber, maybe you should write your songs like that, that you don't have to do all these decisions yourself, and the same goes with making two good demos. I always make my demos sound crap, because I don't want to be stuck with some of the stuff that you can't recreate later.
Yeah,
that's a very good tip.
Yeah,
right there.
Seriously, man, guilty. It's such a disappointment too. Like, if you put all this time into a demo and really captured this thing that you think is great, and then you think that you're going to go to the studio and then do it for real. The problem is you already did it for real, just with shitty DIs or something and out of tune. You already did it for real. Like, you're not gonna be able to put yourself back in that moment. Like, it's a hard lesson to learn, but I feel like once you've learned it, it's hard to unlearn it. And like, once you've had the experience of really loving something and then trying to recreate it properly, and then I guess it's like well recorded, but it sounds like shit. It's like, it's this weird thing. It's like technically better, but it's worse. And once you experience that, you'll never forget that. I want to change topics and talk about guitar some. And a few things I'm curious about, because I know that you told me in conversation that you don't consider yourself a good guitar player. I consider you a really good guitar player, but I know nobody considers themselves a good guitar player. I know some of the greatest guitar players on earth who don't consider themselves good. So, like, I think that that's just part of being good, is not considering yourself good. So anyhow, that said, I'm not with you every day, so I don't know how you spend your musical days, like, and what your priorities are. But in order to get ready for the studio to track, like, especially on a song like this, that there are going to be changes. Your skills, the ability to play, that's got to be ready. You got to have some familiarity with the parts, but obviously can't be worked out the way that you would for a live show where the parts are the parts and you can practice them exactly. So how do you go about, how do you go about preparing yourself on the playing side for a session like this where your hands have to be able to do whatever is thrown at you, and you kind of have to know how to play the song, but not really, because the song you have going in, it might not really be exactly the song you have when you're tracking. So how do you get yourself there?
Well, I'm probably guilty of, as you saw from my use of my iPad when we were recording the guitars, because normally in my typical situation, referring a bit back to the songwriting part, making bad demos, I've come to the point now where I write all my music just with a piano sound. I write the songs with a piano sound and make the arrangements, and then I adapt it to what, guitars and bass and stuff like after the fact. And I literally tab everything in Cubase in real time, so that when it comes down to recording guitar, I don't even, a lot of the guitar parts, I don't even play them first. I just learn the stuff as I go and play, to the score and tablature in real time with my sessions. And since this was on Pro Tools, it's and everything, I had to just have printed score of what I was doing and playing along. So I probably should have been more prepared.
I should say that all musicians are doing this. No.
Yeah?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Just learning it on the spot.
Yeah, but also, I mean, this is not like, there's some, pull of it, but it's not like a super technical song, in that respect. So I think it was very manageable, I think.
All right. So first of all, that's really, really impressive, because, and so I don't know if you remember when this change started to happen. And I don't know if this happened with the bands that you recorded, because I feel like you always had, I guess the first time I heard about you was with Opeth. And so like I always just associated you with producing the Good Musician bands. But I don't know if you remember, somewhere around 2007, 8, 9, 10, at least I know bands that started coming to me, they started coming without having ever played the stuff, because it was all in Guitar Pro. And so they would write everything in Guitar Pro, and then we'd get to the session and they've never played it before, and it doesn't work on guitar. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, they have these riffs where it's a jump from like, the 18th fret on the high string to like the 5th fret on the low string, and just like these weird ass jump arounds and like just things that don't make any sense, like on the instrument itself. And so, like, in my experience, there's only been very few people who I've noticed write on, in a score or on Guitar Pro or whatever without playing it, who then come in and then it makes sense. So if you're actually able to do that, that's pretty remarkable, because it's not common at all to be able to do that. But also, I guess that speaks to your skill as a guitar player. So what I'm wondering is, when you are writing it that way, are you at all thinking about, like, are you seeing the guitar in your head, or is it purely just when you get to recording, you're going to look at it and then you'll figure out how to make it work?
Yeah. It's rather that, because to me, a lot of the reason it's not like just to make bad demos, but it's also the part where I've been playing guitar for such a long time that there's so much muscle memory going on. Yeah. This was my reason to going to 7-string. This was my reason to going for an 8-string guitar. It was not to just play everything I did lower. It was like to put my mind in a different, where I skip the muscle memory part, where you go straight to the music. Yeah, and that's really helped. Yeah, to write with a piano sound. And like, if this sounds great, you get the chords together, the aligning the different harmonies, they're right registered. There's always a way to figure out. I will, of course, limit myself to like, okay, I'm writing this song for a song in drop C tuning. I will take that into consideration. Otherwise, it's a mess. But usually, I don't think about how to play it. first when I arrange the parts, but then of course, as soon as I start, putting the tablature down, I will of course go through and like, okay, I need to move this voicing around like this to make it playable. So then I will I have shortcuts on my keyboard here, like to move to string, blah, blah, blah. And also trying out, different voicing to where they may sound best, and so it's all an experiment for me. But for me personally, it's just so much better to not have to deal with all of that and second guessing my muscle memory as well. In that part is like, take the music for what it is and try to adapt it afterwards.
You gotta have a lot of trust in your own playing to be able to do that.
Yeah, but or I can hire someone who's better than me.
Or you can hire someone that's better than you.
That's what I do live. I mean, my solo band, I just make sure I have someone who's amazing at guitar. I can pitch all the hard parts on them.
And there's something to be said for having great musicians in your band. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
I always try to make sure I'm the worst player. It's that's
totally.
Yeah, that's the secret, I think.
Yeah, that's what I tell my kids too. Like, put yourself in a situation where everybody's better than you, because then they are the glass ceiling of where you can go.
Yeah, exactly.
Not yourself. Yeah, and and again, this would thank you for your kind words about my playing. But I think Jens have been working with a lot of these amazing guitar players, for example, and I think it's in my position, because I've been in some situation in a band, that has some kind of mythical aspect to it and everything. And we were pretty early on with some of the Emperor stuff. There's some like really complimentary and high, genius words and stuff like it's thrown around, and people say, oh, you're so humble, blah blah blah. And honestly, I'm not. I feel I have a really good relationship to where I'm at and where I want to go and learn and everything. But I think it's a matter of perspective, because if someone says genius, I'm thinking of real geniuses, like Bach, and when I think of a great guitar player, I think of, Fredrik Åkesson,
yep,
and John Petrucci, people who can do, Fredrik is probably my favorite guitar player, to this day, because he has the legacy of the feel of like old school guitar playing.
Is insane.
It's just so tasteful. There's all these shredders. It's just amazing to watch, like sports, but to make it tasteful like that, and that within that technicality. In that regard, it's not comparable. Yeah,
I think that's a really good way to stay humble. Actually, is not to try. It's what I've noticed is it's not about trying to be humble, because I feel like trying to be humble is kind of egotistical. It's in this weird backwards way. It's more about just being aware of who's out there. And so if people are saying, oh, you're so great, you're so great, you're so great, but actually there's a dude, his name's John Petrucci out there. Now, he's great. There was a guy named Bach.
Yeah.
Now that guy was great. I think it's like it helps put a little perspective on things so that you don't allow yourself to believe in yourself the way that a fan does, because that, like, I think if a fan believes that an artist they love is a genius or writes the perfect thing, that's cool. That's great. That's awesome. There's plenty of artists that I feel that way about, but they should never feel that way about themselves, because then they're going to stop.
But we have met them, the people who believe that.
I know. It's
and they're not
weird.
very charming.
No, they're not very charming. And most of the time, they're not actually that great forever. Like,
I mean, it's this glass ceiling. I mean, all of us have, what we know how to do becomes our baseline normal, and by the time you get to this level or this level, that becomes our normal, and by the time we get there, our eyes are on something, further ahead. because I think the reason, all of us have been doing this for quite some time, and the motivation is not to really reach a goal. The motivation for us to do what we do is to stay on the road and keep doing it. Am I right?
Yeah.
Or is that just me?
No. So on the business side, that's not it. But on the art side, yes, 100%. So like with the companies, my goal is not to just stay on the road forever and just do it indefinitely. Like there is an end point for me with business. But the musician side of me, the artist side of me, there is no end point. That's a for the rest of my life thing. And what about you, Jens? I'm curious where you're at with that. Now that you're in both, now that you're kind of like, I feel like you're kind of like in my shoes too, with this 1 foot in business, 1 foot in the art. Like, where do you see that for you?
That's a good question. I should say that I guess most people that get into music production or producing, they don't think anything about business. I certainly did not. I didn't have a thought about running a business.
They do.
I just wanted to produce music, and be in the studio and be able to do it. And I was super happy by the time I felt that I could actually do it. I have a few dollars over left on my account every month. That was like an amazing feeling. Then my goal was reached, so to speak. But of course, I've been doing this I mixed my first album 96, and it's starting to become a few years, and I'm turning 44 later this year. So in Sweden we retire at 65 usually. So I have like 20 years to go. And I guess just continuing. I guess AI will replace me, right? But I also have the new business that just was also by accident. Actually, it wasn't like a schemed plan to start doing these digital products. It was just happened that way.
But you're doing great stuff. Like it's and I'm not trying to kiss your ass, but like I say we as my partners at URM, we're watching everybody. And we have seen, because, like some of my partners have been doing software for forever now. Like Joey's been doing plugins longer than URM has existed. So we kind of have been like paying attention. We have to. And there came a point where every producer started putting out sample packs and IRs and all that. Like, and that wasn't special, but your stuff was just better than everybody's. And then the plugins you started making, again, I'm not trying to kiss your ass. It's just your stuff is great. And so I think because of that, it's become a real business, intentional or not. You make great stuff and fulfill a need in the market, and the market responds, and now you have a business on your hands. So obviously it has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, it is. And I am I am exactly at that point now where I sort of need to try to make a decision how to go on about it, because I released the first thing like 3 years ago already, and up to this point it's been very fun, extremely rewarding in a way. I've been nerding into stuff that I thought I would never have the time to do while creating the guitar amps, for example. I mean, I have knowledge, but the knowledge that I've acquired to be able to do those products it really has helped my production side as well, in terms of it's just so much easier for me to get a really good guitar sound now than it was 3 years ago, because I've made research that I didn't think I would ever need to do.
Scientifically how a guitar sound exists in the universe now, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course that's not the point, but still, and going forward, I feel a lot of joy doing this, like the product side, for that reason, for the research reason, for the ability to go into these things and so far think it's fun. Ask me in 20 years, I'd probably be sick of it. But at this point, having been doing so much mixing, production, etc., it's really fun to be able to actually do something else. So for next year, it is likely that I will be doing more of the products and a bit less of production mixing side for that reason, so to speak. And yeah, but it is also perhaps potentially a better business because production and mixing, it's art in a way for me. It's not a fantastic financial business.
Not a bad one, but
yeah, no, I mean, I enjoy it. I cannot complain. I work with great artists and I have a very nice studio and all that. So I'm not saying that, but it's still, I have friends who went into finance or to other things that laugh at my achievement.
Well, the thing that's funny about business, at least I feel like, URM is different than what you're doing, but I feel like there's a very strong creative component to this all because you have to create things. It's not the same as creating art, but you're still using the creative muscle to create something that makes an impact on somebody else's life. And you are doing a lot of creative work to create something that did not previously exist in the world. And so, especially with URM or Riff Hard, with URM, it originally started with myself or my partners doing the classes, but it was never meant to stay that way. It was meant to expand to being what we think are the best in the field doing it. But the creativity there is in figuring out how to capture and communicate this stuff in a way that is not just you're not just filming something and putting it up there. Like you're packaging it and putting it together in a way that somebody can actually get a result in real life out of it, not just some passive watching. That's why there's so many other aspects to it, like the community aspect and all these other things we do. It all serves this mission of, what we like to say about some of the other education companies is that their product ends the moment that you stop watching, and that's where ours starts. And because I guess the landscape is always changing, and the way that people consume information and interact with information is always changing. There's this strong creative side of having to always figure out how are you going to actually do stuff that will make a difference and also stay ahead of the curve and then stay in touch with what is it that people really want to know about, like that's going to inspire them to want to get better. Like there's this strong creative component, but at the end of the day, I see it as a finite thing. Like I see an end point. There will come a point where it is sold and it's no longer mine. But art, on the other hand, that's never ending. So it's two totally different things. Just kind of to long answer to what Ihsahn said about it just being more about just staying with it. I don't see an end point for the art thing because you're never really at a goal. Like you're never really at anything. Once you finish a project, like it's done. Like it's done and like you're still you. And whatever it was that drove you to create that project in the first place is still there.
Tarantino, he was supposed to do 10 movies, wasn't it? And it's coming up, right? His final movie.
Movies, but not 10. Yeah, but not only 10 works. That's the thing with Tarantino.
Yeah.
He's transitioning to TV after that, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, so it's not like Tarantino is retiring. Well, I mean, like long form TV, like, so basically like 12-hour long movies. But, with Tarantino, he's not quitting. He wanted to make 10 movies and then transition to making stuff in a different way. But
But I guess I can relate, like with my long term, in the case where you can make a plan. I mean, I still love making records, but I guess I'm becoming more and more open to, other ways of utilizing, this passion and just thinking, creatively, like, could I be as passionate about, utilizing what I know and what I've learned in some other way? That it, all the time, every album I do something different to not be bored. That I want to be just as excited about making a new record now than I was when I was 16. So I have to put myself in a position where I'm like that. And, on the topic of throwing compliments around, for both of you, I mean, I think, because you were talking about business, and that's definitely, like Gene Simmons would have said, there's music and there's business, music business. But what I realized, of course, we know how it is like in the business side of things, it goes up and down like a yo-yo. You have no control of that. And some years are good, some others, if there's an album year, you spend all this money making a record, and otherwise, other times you're touring and selling records, it's up and down. But I mean, no matter, the income, it hasn't made me a more creative person to have more money. Mm-hmm. That you can only do so much. So there's a different gap between there. But then it's the other side of things, that it's not only the art, but I would like to compliment Jens now that I got to spend so much time, not only with him, but also the entire team, and your guys at Fascination Street, that some of them are early in the career. And we worked together enough to see some of the guys, starting out just doing the editing and then aspiring to take on more and more. And for you, I would like to compliment you, Jens, on creating an environment and a culture, inviting, these other talents, into your, flow of things, sharing and, creating an environment where you, perhaps you are the glass ceiling, but still, you're spreading the craft, and all these experiences, and then with URM Academy, to share that onwards. Because I think in some way, when sharing like this, doing courses like this, or just in my experience, giving, like lectures, I've never understood why people would want me to come, like, give a guest lecture at some music school or something, or clinics for that matter. But for some reason, I just start talking about the stuff that I think is important and some of my experiences. And, and for some people, it's some eye-opening things, just perspectives, which I take for granted. But for someone like myself, when I was young, just as passionate about this as I am, so in some way, it feels good if, as a grown-up, I can be one of those people who may, push people in the right direction, into a life of music in some sort, or those perspectives that we've all learned over the years. And I think with the course and with the whole thing with Fascination Street, growing with more people, URM Academy, I think that is extremely valuable thing, for the next generation of creative people, because that will never change.
Well, I feel like, thank you. I feel like what I mean by we is in, like, those of us who have been in it for a while don't do that, who else is going to? You can't go to a university to study this stuff. That's the thing. Like, it is up to like this generation and the generation older than us to spread it on, or it's not going to get spread, because, for almost anything else, you could just go to university and get that. But metal, still, it's changing, but it's not in mainstream academia. The way that you go about making metal records, it's like a different skill set than the traditional. I think the traditional skill set is very important too, but the way that things are done it's its own world. And I think that it's up to the people who have, who have kind of defined what that world is up to this point to pass it on to the next generation, or it just will not get passed on. So if you care, you help. I think that attitude is starting to change for the better. Because I can tell you, when we started URM, this is we're almost on year 9. The attitude towards this sort of thing was very different. It was very negative. Very few people wanted to work with us, and there were a lot of people who felt like we were, I don't know, like we were spilling CIA secrets or something. Like this is you're just sharing the nuclear documents with everybody, or something crazy. Like they were acting like that, like we were messing it up for everybody, or sharing these highly coveted secrets. But I never saw it that way, because first of all, you can't share your brain. At the end of you can't share your ears or your brain or your tastes.
Yeah.
Right? That is 100% you. And that's every individual is going to have to develop that for themselves. You can't share your work ethic. You can't share your vision. Like that's all, that part is 100% on the individual. But the techniques, the workflows, habits, like lay of the land, all that stuff can be shared. And I think it should be shared. And the attitude has changed a lot. Like I feel like we're at a time period now where people who are against sharing information and helping out are now they feel like dinosaurs now, and it's super rare. Whereas, like when we started, man, we got a lot of hate and a lot of resistance. And, people really tried to take us down several times, but I really did believe in this mission and still do. And I think, and it's good to see that it's kind of spreading to where uh, more and more people from, like I'd say the 35-year-old and up generation in metal are pretty cool with helping out the younger generation and, spreading the information around. Because again, in any other genre, like if you want to go learn orchestration, you can just go to a university and learn orchestration, classical composition, jazz, blues, country. Like you can go learn that stuff, like from almost any music school in the world. Like you can just go and learn it, and it's not a big deal. You could just go learn it. That not the same with metal.
No, but it's I mean, music is music, and I'm sure you could adapt. I think this, of course, I think the production of metal music is something, especially I've heard this from engineers and people who work with all kinds of other music, but not metal. And like, it's just too hard. It's just too much going on. And it's apparently some of the hardest music to mix and produce because of the elements, and that may be so. But I wanted to, because I have been doing some interviews lately and talked about the course and everything, and like, in regards to this sharing of information of what it's about. And I think the technology, we've been doing this for a while, and I've recorded a lot of albums just to analog tape, and we've come so far. And this technology where people can have a laptop and make recordings at home that sonically sounds far more pristine than what I could ever do with my 4-track machine or whatever. So much of that has changed. But I think some of the big takeaways from a course like this, that even though there's all the plugins, there's all the emulations and Pro Tools and editing and all that, but still, as the course goes through, tuning of drums, tuning of guitars, microphone placement, capturing a performance, even though as you said, Jens, that you edit it, that hasn't changed. The actual communication of the music in that sense, that hasn't changed. So and for all these young people who are at home with their laptops and work with all these plugins, but the plugins are still emulations of real things, and to see how those real things respond and react, I guess it's easier to relate on how to use the emulations. I think a lot of people will use the old school compressor plugins, who has all the graphics that makes it look really old, but have no clue of the gain staging on how hard you push them or whatever to get results that you need. And I think a course like this, demonstrates that even if you are just emulating and don't have the resources to go to a big studio like Fascination Street or anything, having some feel for what it is that you're trying to emulate, and it's really, really valuable.
It is. And, I think it's important to note that I think people could see a course like this and think to themselves that it doesn't apply to them because they don't have a studio like Fascination Street or a team like that. And they're not working with artists such as yourself. They're just working with like shitty local bands or whatever. All they have is like a bedroom, a laptop, headphones, some plugins, and that's it. So none of this applies. And I think that it's important to say that it does apply, because Jens, I know that if you were in a situation where you had to mix something in headphones on your laptop and Pro Tools, you could still do it. Like you could still, it might not be your ideal scenario, but you could still do it if you had to. And I know that Will Putney there's some record he did that sounds great that he had to do in a hotel room in Australia, jet lagged in headphones. I know Nolly mixed a Periphery album in headphones on a tour bus on tour. I know Zach Cervini has done stuff in like earbuds. These are not ideal scenarios, but the point is they know what they're doing, and therefore they were totally able to make it work. Because they know what they're doing. And so like the idea is to see something like this, like a course like this, and just kind of just get an understanding, a perspective on how this stuff is done, and then apply it to your own situation. Because a situation like Fascination Street Studios is a very rare kind of setup.
And even more rare now. I mean, there are hardly any big studios left to have that kind of room, But as you said, as it all comes out, I mean, the big white hat and the expensive knives doesn't make you a chef,
No, and Jens didn't respond to what I said about the laptop, so I'm wondering.
Of course, I mean that's what I always said as well, that you use the tools that are available to you. There's not like one single unicorn piece of equipment or something that I have to use or that you have to use. Of course, it helps, and you're very used to how certain things are, especially if you're as old as me. It's like as soon as you deviate, just put me in front of a different Pro Tool system than the one I'm using, I will be like, what's happening here? What's going on with this keyboard? Because everything is muscle memory, etc. Takes a little longer, but of course, it's not about that. It's about your brain and the mindset. And without having watched the final course of like 35 hours of edited material, I would say that as much as it is like practical information on how to do things, it's also a lot about the process and why we think in certain ways, the mental aspect, the psychological aspect, the music part, the visions, those sort of things is as valid no matter the equipment you have at hand for a certain task. Is that correct? Without having watched the
That's
course.
absolutely
Did you watch
correct.
The course? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
Oh, you watched it.
It's got 35 hours is no joke. Let me tell you, that's intense. But yeah, there's a lot of technical, practical stuff, but it's combined with the reason why for everything, which I think is what matters at the end of the day, because people's tools, there no two studios are exactly the same, except for if you go to a university and they have like 12 SSL rooms with the exact same stuff. That's the only time that you'll ever find studios that are identical. Every studio, and I've been to not all of them, but I've been to, if you can think of like any famous or like known metal studio or rock studio, I've probably been there, and they're all different, and they all have problems. Like they all have quirks. There's no perfect place. Every room has something wrong with its acoustics. Like there's always some piece of gear that doesn't work. Like someone's computer is from like 2004. Like it's just, there's always some problem that's unique to that place, yet they make it work. And it's not really a problem. And so to watch something like this and think, oh, well, sounds good because Fascination Street Studios is set up like this, and it's that drum room. That's I mean, that stuff helps, but that's not why.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. I wish I knew that. I wish I knew all this before I bought all this expensive equipment.
Well,
we say that, and then we go buy something really, really expensive. It does one thing.
Well, it doesn't hurt.
No. Actually, that's another. For me personally, a takeaway, like something that I, of course, am aware of, but I also try to take more to heart as for my future work as well. When you have a room like that, and that the competence, most importantly, and also the courage of commitment, because I think we spoke about the illusions and what inspires us, and all these records that I hold as kind of examples of what I want to achieve, like aesthetically, they are all formed by the time and place and situation of where and when it was recorded. That whole thing binds it together. Whereas these days, without, you can't even out them because there's so many bands who sound exactly the same. And even just like listen to pop music, this week, there are three songs or four songs on the top 10 in the world that has the same beat in it, so this generic, middle ground of
metal songs as well.
Oh yeah,
totally. And so the limitations, as you say, of a studio or whatever tools you have there will help form that. And I'm guilty of this a lot of the time, especially since I work alone, that I will, with recording DIs with everything, and being able to edit and second guess everything at until the very, very last moment, it might take away some of the genuine expression that you have in mind, and the magic of those first takes or what have you, and we're at over in Sweden, finding that drum sound, that really, found the sound that, this sounds great for this song. And then every consecutive decision on, what kind of guitar amp we ended up using, what bass sound we ended up using, how we recorded the vocals, how we arranged the harmonies of the additional vocals. They were all decisions made, layering on the, what was committed, in a sense. And I think we're all in a digital age. We're very consumed with this, that we can always edit and replace, and then the end result, as we've all heard, becomes very, very stale. And we don't. I mean, back in the 80s, it wasn't really hard to tell Wasp and Motley Crue apart, and it wasn't hard to tell Iron Maiden and Judas Priest apart, or Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. But I mean, this there are ups and downs of this, mostly ups of kind of the democratic, what can I say, access to all these tools, and that you don't really need labels anymore to make you make records or whatever. There's a total upside. The downside is like, you give everybody access to the same tools and the exact same tools, and not like, I think I'm explaining this wrong, but I think you get my point.
Well, it's basically, I think the level playing field has made it to where you have just as much access to really bad music as to really good music, and I think so. I don't think that there's less great bands. I think there's more actually now because there is so much access to being able to record and to get better through like learning, like, because in the past, and I know we had to end this in a minute, but in the past, think about it. When I had to get guitar lessons, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, I was limited to whoever was around, right? I did have a pretty good teacher, but that was luck, right? And I know that like Kirk Hammett, for instance, studying from Joe Satriani is luck, that because of proximity. But there's most people from our generation and older had shitty teachers just by virtue of the fact that that's the person who was near them. And so now with the access to information from like the best minds in the field, it's possible to get that much better. And so I think, and because people can now record themselves, there's just a lower barrier to entry. Like it's a lot more possible for a lot more people to get better. And, I think Leprous is a perfect example of like where young kids these days can just become phenoms growing up in this modern environment. But like
I told you about that, right?
Yeah. I'm bringing them up.
That was forced.
Yeah,
me and my wife forced Einar to play.
Yeah, but man, those guys are incredible musicians, and they're like, I think they're a product of the best thing that can happen in the way that generation learns. And
totally.
And so I think there's more great bands now than there were before, but there's also way more terrible bands, and
no moderation.
and way more access to it. And so and so it's just like you're inundated in a sea of shit, but there's still a lot of great stuff. But
there's the flip side, there's that it kind of goes in parallel, because I think there's so many bands who are now successful that would never have gotten a chance through the keyhole of a record company.
Exactly.
So for this kind of access is really great for music as an art form, but not maybe great for music as a business, because it's flooded with all the kind of crap as well. But having access to technology, I mean, you and me, Jens, we know I've been working a lot with orchestrations lately, and
I know something about that.
Yeah, and to have access to that, all the stuff that I've been able to learn, from online, and just even old orchestration books and what have you that are now accessible, online, and all kinds of, that simplifies some of the stuff that I tried to study on my own. And I had access to nothing. I mean, I live in a very, very, very small town in Notodden. I had 5 guitar lessons from a local blues guitar player. And then they said, well, I've shown you the riffs. I can't tell you how to play a solo. And that was it. And then luckily, my luck was I got hold of the tablature book for Seventh Son of a Seventh Son for Iron Maiden. And every day after school, like 3-4 hours playing along to the record. That's my guitar tutor, So to have access to the stuff that people have today, I mean, they don't know how lucky they are. And to see my own kids, how they so easily access, the best resources for anything they want to do, and especially with music.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's an incredible time period. Well, dudes, this is a good place to end the conversation. I want to thank you both for taking the time. And, beyond that, I want to obviously thank you both for contributing everything you contributed to helping make this How It's Done happen. I do think it's the best thing that URM's ever done, and my favorite thing. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time to hang out on this podcast. And I will see you next week.
Right back at you. I mean, thank you to both of you for including me and my guys in the project. I had an amazing time, and I hope people will have just as much fun watching this as we had making it.
Yeah. And people should know that it was hard work. We have really put ourselves into this course, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm very happy that I chose Ihsahn, and I'm super happy with how the song turned out as well. So
the song is great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.